Hello, and thank you for joining us. My name is Randy Reid. I'm the editor and publisher of the Edison Report, and today I have the honor of once again moderating the annual Lighting Forum, sponsored by the National Lighting Bureau and co-sponsored by the Edison Report and the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the IBEW, which so graciously lends us its production facilities and personnel to help make this event so special every year. The panel I'm about to convene will focus on prescription lighting, with discussion provided by two eminent professionals in the field, Dr. Mariana Figueiro, Director of the Lighting Research Center and a Professor of Architecture at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and Robert Soler, Vice President of Human Biological Technologies and Research with BIOS Lighting. Let's start with you, Robert. What exactly is prescription lighting?
It's a good question. I actually don't really know. So the idea of prescription lighting is the idea that maybe you need different lighting than I need or Mariana needs, and assuming that we're all in the same time zone, we really just need brighter days and darker nights. And so the prescription is probably holistic around. There are some things that we've seen from seasonal affective disorders or delayed sleep phase that could be actually prescribed by a doctor. But holistically, I think that what we all need is a prescription of brighter days and darker nights.
Okay. What is circadian lighting? What does that mean?
Well, I think circadian lighting has been used in too many ways, to be quite honest. I don't think we have a firm definition of what circadian lighting is. I think different people use it for different things. Obviously, if you look at it as the words, it should be lighting that impacts your circadian system. But as Robert pointed out, it's really light and dark. So I think we should not just be talking about lighting, but we should be talking about circadian light and dark as a starting point or as a conversation. I think that circadian lighting has been used also for referring to, for example, the direct impacts of light, which is not necessarily circadian, but it's also used for that. It's been used obviously for what it should be used, which is how it impacts your biological clock or the timing of your biological clock. But I think right now it's being used for everything, and it's also being used as equal to or related to tunable lighting, which is probably not the best way to use that term.
But I think tunable lighting helps with circadian lighting. Is that correct?
Tunable lighting can be used to implement circadian lighting, but it's not required.
Okay.
Right? So you can do circadian lighting with light sources that are not tunable. You can do circadian lighting by going outside in the morning and not turning on your computer or your iPads in the evening.
And please.
And I would just jump in that if tunable lighting isn't combined with intensity changes, you're probably not doing enough to create the differences between brighter days and darker nights. If it's just changing the colors, there's not enough variance there to really create a day-night delineation, which is really what we're trying to achieve.
Okay, so it's not only lower light levels in the evening, but we're also trying to get away from it's called the blue light, correct? We don't want blue light at night, but we do want blue light in the morning. Is that fair to say?
You can have blue light at night as long as it's low light levels. If it's below threshold, it doesn't matter. If it's blue, yellow, and so on. What happens is if you have blue, you need less amount to impact your biological clock. Because you don't know what that amount is, because there's a lot related to photic history, so the amount that might impact me may be different than the amount that might impact you. So then stay away from blue. It's a good way to say it, just because it then minimizes the chances that it will impact the biological clock at night. And the same thing with the morning light. You can have with an incandescent lamp, which has blue but not as much as a 5000K, for example, you can still have enough light to activate your biological clock if you increase the amount. But if you're going to be in dim light, because you're not increasing that amount, then the blue helps because you need less amount of blue to have that impact. So I think, as Robert said, it's really looking at amount, spectrum, timing and duration, so you have to look at all these different components. And I think that's really the problem I have with the term circadian lighting, that it became just spectrum, and it's not. It has
So
really to be a holistic
when you look at
approach.
amount, time, spectrum, who should look at that? We talk about prescription lighting. Who should prescribe this?
Well, right now, believe it or not, all the lighting designers, everybody that puts the lighting in the space is doing that. I think people don't like to hear that, but they're already doing it. So you have really two different things. You have the physicians, like the ones that are you use light boxes for prescribing for seasonal depression. That's a prescription lighting that it's done by a physician. But you also have your just ambient lighting that you are, every day, everybody is specifying. So I think it goes from designers, professionals are already doing it, and then you can go more to the clinical medical applications, which you have some physicians that are doing for certain
For seasonal
applications.
affect disorder.
For seasonal affective disorders, for delayed sleep.
I just want to kind of jump on that because it's a really important point, and it's what Mariana said before about photic history. So, and I just want to kind of layman that up. So light at night affects a construction worker who's outside all day long far less than someone who's indoors in dark environments all day long. So, so it's a relationship between the two. And so what I think from a prescriptive lighting standpoint, the most passive thing that you could do is basically give more light during the daytime to try to basically set that photic history, to give them brighter days, to give them something to compare to, because it's really difficult to tell people, just turn off the lights at night and try to, keep everything low, because that's like a social kind of intervention. Sure. So really, and what I've learned is that people don't want to do it. People, I did, some jet lag mitigation with the Dodgers, and, there was a huge BS factor where they were just like, yeah, I don't know if I believe this. This is really going to do anything meaningful. And so, but really what we learned there was that when we did it, we actually infused our lighting into the airplane itself. And so that is where we passively did something and used the people who knew better, the medical staff, and basically gave them the lighting when they needed it at the exact right time to do something passively where they didn't have to actually physically do anything. So I think it's really important to kind of, there's a prescription, but we have to kind of set those standards in the daytime lighting, because it is by far the most passive way to do something. In my opinion, is that that's the strongest way to get a lasting impact.
You mentioned the airlines. I think we need to do a much better job of educating them. Now that they have the controls, they don't know what to do with it. And I was on one international flight, and we must have gone from 2,700 to 6,000 K 10 times in 10 minutes when they were landing.
Because they love the change.
Yeah.
They love the.
I didn't love it.
But going back, I think my idea of prescription lighting is the best thing is go outdoors.
Sure.
First thing in the morning. Get up, go outside. Okay? That's the best thing you can do. Now, there are populations that you can't do that. Prisoners, obviously, you could, but you tend not to be able to do it. Alzheimer's patients, you can't do it. So there are certain populations that you then need to have the electric lighting to add to it and I agree, it has to be part of the ambient. For office workers, for example, that becomes very hard though, because you're not staying in one place the entire day all the time. So, part of what I think prescription lighting will be in the future is I got my own sensor, I know how much light I'm being exposed to, and that's then talking to wherever I am with my personal lighting device. So I think, to me, prescription lighting will be different for different groups of people.
I think the Apple Watch is going to begin to measure UV exposure. Now, tell our audience a little bit about what populations benefit the most between light and dark.
Well, I have to say that the populations that you can keep them quote unquote constrained in an environment are the populations that are benefiting more. So we have data showing obviously Alzheimer's disease patients because they're 24 hours in one facility, so it's very easy for you to indeed deliver that prescription lighting without any effort. And we are seeing huge success with the Alzheimer's patients population, improved sleep, reduction in their depression, and reduction in their agitation. I mean, that's just been, and we're just about to start a study looking at metabolic syndrome and diabetes and inflammation with light. So we just got a new NIH award to do that. So I think the Alzheimer's is probably one that I feel like we're ahead of the curve with that. We are seeing success with cancer patients. So we just got a publication on cancer myeloma transplant patients. So they are in the hospital room for 2 to 3 weeks. So we basically work with Acuity. They put a light that just uplights and bathes the entire room with that light. So anywhere that the patient is, the patient is receiving.
Important?
No, actually, it was a 3000 K light source, so you just increased the amount, and we got the circadian stimulus. That's what we were, targeting to get. But they are in the hospital room. They can't get out because they are so sick, because they have very immune deficiency when they go through the bone marrow transplant. So they're there for 24 hours, so you can then monitor and deliver that light without any, interference of other types of light and so on.
And you're not saying that you're helping with cancer, you're helping the patient sleep better.
We actually are seeing better sleep, and we're seeing a strong reduction in depression scores and fatigue scores, which are major issues with this population. So I think that the populations that, we haven't done prisoners yet, but we did get Cook County and Chicago actually interested in working with us looking at prisoners because it's the same thing. You have people locked in so I think that the populations that you can control, and I think Robert mentioned, if you're in an airplane, or populations that you can control, the 24-hour light dark patterns are the best ones, are the easiest ones, and are the ones that you see most robust. With office workers, we've been able to see through the work we did with General Service Administration that if you have higher amounts of the circadian stimulus during the day, you sleep better at night. But there's a much, much wider variation because people are going to be exposed to very different light-dark patterns over the course of the 24 hours.
Can you explain the similarities and difference between the melanopic lux model and the circadian stimulus model? Either one. Sure.
There are two sort of competing metrics, and there are similarities and differences between the two metrics. The fundamental differences is that the melanopic lux, it only takes into account the response of one photoreceptor out of 5 photoreceptors in the retina, which is the IPRGCs, or the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. They have the photopigment called melanopsin that has a peak sensitivity at 480 nanometers. The IPRGCs are really the main conduit of the signals from the retina to the biological clock, but they do receive input from rods and cones, which are the classical photoreceptors. So the melanopic lux doesn't take that input into account. The second thing about it is it really, it does talk about how light stimulates that photoreceptor, but it doesn't really talk as much about the response. So you don't really know what 300 melanopic lux is with respect to a response by the circadian system. And what the circadian stimulus does, first of all, it does take into account all the photoreceptors. And we model how we think those photoreceptors are combined in the retina to give the signal to the biological clock. And then circadian stimulus, it's equivalent to acute meltdown suppression after 1 hour exposure to that spectral power distribution and that light level. So it is a response by the circadian system. We know that meltdown suppression is not the only response by the circadian system. There are many responses, but at least there's a response. So what it is, it's sort of a surrogate for how that light impacts one outcome of the circadian system. Now, Having said that, the differences really occur more at the sort of the cooler light sources. So above 4500 K, we do have some subadditive response by the circadian system, which is more complicated than we want to get into here. But at the warmer side, the 3000 K light sources, for example, they're pretty much very similar responses the way we model circadian stimulus. So the differences are at specific parts of the spectrum. And I think that to us, the fundamental difference is that circadian stimulus really takes into account what we know from the science, which is that all classes of photoreceptors have input into the circadian system response.
I just want to jump on that a little bit more, because I think that it's really important is that there are the main differences, are, at least as the model is concerned, are in the cooler color temperatures. And so what I've been seeing in talking to all these lighting designers and architects is that no one's really designing around 5,000 Kelvin. Most of the designs are 3,500 Kelvin and warmer, and in these color temperatures, the models are almost identical.
They're the same, yeah.
They're almost identical. And so I think that there's been a lot of confusion, and people are on the fence trying to figure out when the LRC and the melanopic lux model are going to agree which one to choose. But for most designs that everyone's using 3,500 Kelvin and warmer, they're the same. You don't have to choose. And I did some math on it. A CS of 0.3, which is the recommendation by the LRC, is equivalent to a melanopic lux of 150 melanopic lux. So that is almost within,
with
a
what,
handful
a
of
3,000
percent.
K? With what light source?
Well, so I've done it, I modeled with 2,700 Kelvin, 3,000 Kelvin, and 3,500 Kelvin. And so it seems to track on 150 melanopic lux is equal pretty much within a
Don't forget,
of,
at the eye. Designers tend
Yeah,
to
of
forget
course.
at the eye,
Yeah,
because
okay, so
when we
okay,
say
right.
the
Good
lux,
point.
people tend to think horizontal on the
Sure.
work plane, but no, it's at eye level. Yeah.
Right. So it has to be here, simulating the view of the occupant. So it's here. But 150 melanopic lux is equivalent to a CS of 0.3 at 3,500 Kelvin and warmer, which everyone that I've talked to is, that's probably 85% of all designs. So for the majority of people, you don't have to choose melanopic lux or circadian stimulus because they are fairly in agreement at those color temperatures.
Yeah, I think, Randy, to be quite honest, my position is I think we should give designers and specifiers all the information, okay,
Right.
and not have them choose. And as long as we do that, people will make the choice they need to make, and they will say, all right, I think this one is better than this one, so I'm going to use this one. But if we can give them, if you're using melanopic lux, you use this amount. If you're using circadian stimulus, you use this amount. And here's how you calculate both. I think the fight and all the conversation about metrics, it's really, it's not necessary. You can do it. Obviously, like I said, you have the science part, which we don't agree with melanopic lux for the reasons why we think the scientific evidence, it's not just one photopigment. But from a practical perspective, somebody that needs to engineer a product or needs to do an application, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
You really, as long as you know and you understand, these people are smart. They can make a decision where they want to go, how they want to do it. And I think to Robert's point, if you keep it on the warm side, I think that there's a lot of push for blue enriched light sources, whatever that means, which is basically 5,000 K, 6,500 K light sources. But I don't think people are ready to get in every single space.
Well, why is there a
and
push? Because of higher productivity?
No, the push is because if you use a 5,000 K or a 6,500 K, you probably need 40–50% less amount of light to have the same impact on the circadian system. So say for 3,000 K, you need, say, 250 lux at the eye to reach the circadian stimulus of 0.3. You probably need more. You need a 250 lux for 6,500 K, and you probably need a 350 lux. I'm guessing those numbers, okay? So you need 40, 50, 60% more light level at the eye. But when you think about it, if you move the light source closer, you can account for that difference in light level. Okay.
So it's the economics. That's why some people would go with
The energy and so.
5,000 or 6,000.
But I think Robert made a point in the beginning of the conversation is that people talk too much about spectrum, but you can gain a lot more on how you affect the circadian system by changing light levels. Okay. In fact, we did some modeling, which was really interesting. If you go from 300 lux, or if you set 300 lux on the work plane and you go from a 3,000 K to a 5,000 K, you only have 2 fixtures in the 5,000 K that reaches that circadian stimulus of 0.3, okay? And you have no fixtures at 3,000 K. But if you, at 3,000 K, you go from 300 lux horizontal to 500 lux horizontal, you now have 9 fixtures that meet.
Got it.
If you go from 300 lux horizontal to 500 lux horizontal on the 5,000 K, you have 12 fixtures. So you have only 3 fixtures more. So the point is, if you change from 300 to 500 lux
Right.
horizontal, you get a lot more
Okay,
options
more
than if
choices.
you go from 3,000 K to 5,000 K.
Okay.
So
Good
think
advice.
beyond
Right.
spectrum. That's
Right.
really what I would recommend.
Okay.
Okay.
Closing thoughts?
There's a lot that went in here. You know what? I think that the big takeaway here is that for anyone who's listening to this is that a big gating item for adoption of circadian lighting. So the reality is that we're starting to understand that circadian rhythms is talked about as sleep, wake, productivity, but there's starting to become a lot more evidence that it's a lot more pervasive. Our biology, every cell in our body has a clock, and so when that's misaligned and there's circadian desynchrony, there's a lot of things that are starting to come out. There's a really cool study that showed that if you give morning light to night owls, it made them less night owls, but it also reduced their ADHD symptoms. So some of the stuff that is becoming very prevalent in modern society behaviorally is starting to become a downstream consequence of circadian desynchrony. And so I think it's really important that we adopt circadian lighting as a thing, as a common practice. And to me, the idea that for most of the designs that we use, these two models are the same. Right. It's really important to say, okay, we're past this hurdle. As long as you're not doing ridiculously cool white light sources, you don't have to choose. For most of the designs, they're the same, and let's move forward and start getting some really good data.
Great. Mariana?
Bright days, dark nights. Stop just talking about spectrum. Okay, you have amount, you have duration, you have timing, which is very important for the circadian
Right.
system. So think more holistic about that. I think it's real. I really think that we can make a difference in people's lives. And I don't think we need to wait much longer. Do we know it all? No, we don't know it all.
Right.
We still have, thank goodness, because then I can continue
Right.
to do the
Exactly.
research. So that's great. But it shouldn't stop us.
Right.
Okay?
We have enough now.
We have enough now that we can make a difference in people's lives. And remember, you are already putting lights in people's homes, offices, nursing homes. It's already being done, so let's do better.
Right.
And we have the knowledge to do better.
Right.
Okay, so I think those are the things that I'd like to stop talking about CCT only, stop talking about horizontal foot candles only, okay? Distribution matters, light level matters, so it's a whole package, but we have enough knowledge now that we can start implementing those things.
Okay. Well, thank you both.
Thank you.
I appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Randy. Thanks for having
Good
us.
discussion, guys.
Yes.
Really good.